You're with Cape Talk.
9:36 it is. Views and News through till 12 o'clock. Your WhatsApp messages now for the Naked Scientist. Dr. Chris Smith joins us via Zoom from the UK. He's here to answer your questions, and I see the class is gathered. Welcome, Dr. Smith. Welcome
Morning,
back.
Clarence. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. We just woke up to some bad news, and I'm trying to get over it. One of our amazing African correspondents, 75 years old, passed on yesterday. And we had the last conversation with him about the African continent right here on Tuesday. So it came as a bit of a shock to the system, reeling in its wake.
Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And how are you doing?
Well, I'm
All well
all
with
right.
your soul?
Yeah, I'm all right. We're heading into winter, so it's now getting colder because it's been the bizarrest year, to be perfectly honest. I know we're doing that classic English thing about chatting about the weather, but it has been a really weird autumn, and it's kind of poignant because we've right now got the COP29 conference going on in Azerbaijan, which is a huge producer of oil and gas. And there we are with climate leaders and virtue signalers from around the world flying in, huge carbon cost, to go and talk about this kind of thing and generate a lot more hot air. But we are genuinely having some extremely weird weather because by now it should be nice and frosty and very, very much colder than it has been. And we haven't even turned on the heating in our house. Okay, the odd log fire in the evening, but we and most people in the south of England have not got the heating on yet. And that's very, very unusual. I used to go to sort of November the 5th bonfire night parties when I was little. And there would be frost on the ground. It would be very, very cold. And all the trees would be completely denuded of leaves. We've got trees in our garden that have not yet remembered it's supposed to have been winter, let alone autumn. And they've still got loads of leaves. So certainly things and changes are afoot, but it is beginning to creep up on us and get a little bit colder now. And I'm going to Scotland next week, where it's proper cold in Scotland. I'm going to Glasgow because I'm going to a conference all about science communication of pandemics. Going to go and speak there. So that's to remind me that some parts of the country are still having proper winters.
Yeah, no, for sure. Mount Fuji has been without snow for a long time this November, and it normally returns to Mount Fuji in about November. I hope it has returned by this time. And of course, the hottest year on record.
Yeah, and next year even hotter. But bizarrely, the Alps are celebrating with the best snowfall they've had in a long time, and everyone's flocking there to go skiing at the moment. So this is the thing about climate change. The key's in the name change. Because it doesn't just mean warmer winters, warmer summers. It can mean that the difference between summer and winter is different. It can mean that you get extremes of weather at certain times of the year. Look at Spain at the moment, poor Malaga. I mean, I've walked down some of those streets I was watching this week where there were torrents running down the street and washing cars away. Beautiful bits of Malaga and completely underwater. Totally uncharacteristic. I mean, it happens rarely, but the intensity with which this is occurring is increasing, and the frequency with which this is occurring is increasing. So that's what climate change will do. It will change the unpredictability, the intensity, and the frequency of that unpredictability, as well as also a modest increase in temperatures.
Yeah, I think that's such an important context for us all to remember. Thank you for that, Dr. Chris Smith. Let's get into the first question. It comes from Katlejo. Katlejo says, I'd like to ask Dr. Chris why folic acid is required during pregnancy. In the past, our grandparents had no clinics around to supply folic acid while monitoring pregnancy. In what food did they get their folic acid from?
Well, folic acid is one of our B vitamins. It's actually vitamin B9, and it is absolutely crucial to good health. You get folic acid from green leafy vegetables, broccoli and other things that contain B vitamins. It's a plant-based vitamin, but without it, you can't make new DNA and grow your cells fast enough. And what we discovered in decades gone by was that people who are deficient in folic acid are at higher risk of developing neural tube defects during pregnancy. A neural tube defect is something including spina bifida, where the tube that coils up to form the spinal cord doesn't close up properly at one end, and that's what causes the condition called spina bifida. This is directly linked to neural tube defect, to folic acid deficiency. So if we supplement during pregnancy, it makes sure that a person who may have a dietary deficiency or some kind of other intestinal problem that means they don't have enough B vitamins getting into their system despite adequate intake, it helps to push them over that threshold and make sure that they have adequate folic acid when the crucial stage of development where the neural tube, the nervous system of developing baby is forming, and that's when you're most susceptible. So that's why we fortify food and encourage women who are trying to become pregnant, because you need to have the right levels there in the early stages, but also once you are pregnant, supplement with folic acid, and this can massively reduce the risk. And actually, the interesting thing historically, the reason that we developed as a human race dark skin in the first place was because of a deficiency of folic acid, because our ancestors way back when had light skin because they were hairy. As we lost our hair and became hairless, we became subject, because of course this is all going on in the continent of Africa, we became subject to intense irradiation from the sun, and UV irradiation destroys folic acid through the skin. So people evolved darker skins to defend them from assault on their folic acid, and then they re-evolved lighter skins once they left sunnier climes, got to colder places where the sun shone less, and then another problem kicked in, which is we need some sunshine to make vitamin D. So we went from being folic acid deficient to vitamin D deficient, and that made people change colour again.
Okay, then a question from Peter. Peter wants to know what the multiverse is.
Well, Peter, it's a theory, and as one physicist said to me, you've got to be very careful with theories because you can prove anything you like on paper, but actually proving the reality by experimentation, proper measurement, etc., is a very different beast. But there are a number of theories as to what the universe is. Is the universe the only universe, or are there multiple universes? And one branch of physics argues there could well be multiple universes, all stacked up in parallel, like our universe, but with another universe sitting next to it. We can't see it, we can't feel it, we can't interact with it, except possibly through gravity. We think gravity may be able to propagate between universes, and one of the reasons why we're very interested in gravitational waves, which got the Nobel Prize for people including Kip Thorne in 2016, is because gravitational waves would, we believe, propagate in many of these theories between these parallel universes. So if we can see the gravitational waves, it might help us to deduce what's going on in these parallel universes. But the idea is that we've got multiple different runs at the system, effectively with slightly different parameters, different universes operating in parallel to each other. So who knows, there might be another 567 Cape Talk with the Naked Scientist and Clarence Ford on it, doing a phone-in somewhere in a totally different universe, but with totally different questions.
Hold on a second. Would it be the Naked Scientist and Clarence Ford in another universe?
Well, if they wanted it to be, yes, because if you've got infinite numbers of universes, you could have infinite numbers of possibilities. And the fact that it's evolved in this universe and we're here argues probably, because as someone pointed out, monkeys probably would reproduce the works of Shakespeare. This was actually tested scientifically in the last week or so, if they were given enough time. But the only downside to that is you would need a lot of rolls of the dice. You'd need more than the age of the universe for the monkeys to do it. But if you had many, many millions of universes, that enormously increases the odds. So I think the odds are, there probably is another 567 Cape Talk with Clarence Ford and Chris Smith doing The Naked Scientist somewhere.
In shape and form, okay, right. Let's just leave it there. That sounds like a rabbit hole, and we need more time for that. Let's get to your questions. From Luke, what causes ears to itch? How do we deal with moisture in the ear, and what is the right way to scratch an itching ear?
Well, your ears can itch either on the outside or on the inside, because on the outside, there's the bit we can see, the pinna, and that is a funnel that funnels sound down into the external auditory canal, which is the hairy tube that goes to your eardrum. And things can go in there, air goes in there, infection goes in there, things that cause us to itch because of allergy go in there, insects go in there, and even, as one person pointed out to me, foreign bodies like nuts and things go in there. And if you want a tip, Clarence, the way that you get a peanut out of someone's ear if they drop one in is you pour chocolate in, and it comes out a treat. Just kidding. But the inside of the ear, there's another tube, and that's the eustachian tube, which goes from the back of the nose through to the inside of your eardrum. That's the middle ear. And because it's connected from the inside of your nose to your ear, you will also get infection going via that route, and allergic substances, things you can react to, pollen and so on, can also find their way in there. So you can actually end up with an itchy sensation on the inside of your ear. And people who have things like hay fever will routinely say it's the most annoying, irritating, both physically and literally, metaphorically, the most irritating thing that can happen, because you have an itch you can't scratch. It's on the inside of your ear, and you can wiggle your ear up and down. Helps a bit, but it doesn't take away all the itching. So that is why your ears can itch both outside and inside.
the Naked Scientist on Cape Talk. Andrew says, "Hi guys, a rather repulsive question. Why is vomit always yellow? Is it?"
Well, it looks yellowish, and one of the reasons why, and you notice this especially on an empty stomach, is because you can vomit up not just the contents of your stomach, but also the contents of your small intestine, which is what comes off the stomach and does most of the heavy lifting of digestion and absorption of calories. And you can throw up everything in there and everything in your stomach. And what opens into the small intestine? Well, into your duodenum, called duodenum because it's 12 inches long, and duodecus in Latin means 12. Halfway down your duodenum is the input, the opening, the duct from your pancreas, but also from your liver. What's coming from the liver? Bile. Because bile made by the liver, stored in the gallbladder, is secreted along with pancreatic juice to help break up the fats that we eat. Because fatty substances won't mix with the digestive enzymes, which are watery. So you make bile, which is a mixture of cholesterol, phospholipids, and effectively like detergent, to break up the fat you eat into small droplets that your digestive processes can attack. Bile is made as a breakdown product of hemoglobin, and when you break down hemoglobin, you get a substance called bilirubin, and one of the things added to bile is bilirubin, thrown into it by the liver, which has a browny yellow colour. Hence, what ends up being thrown up is bile, and it's a yellowy brown colour. Hence, it colours what you throw up, especially on an empty stomach.
Gordon on the line with a question for the Naked Scientist. Welcome, Gordon.
Good morning to you both. My question relates to skin and organs of the body, and is there a relationship between issues with the organs and areas of the skin where sensitivity might arise? For example, I've just been through brachytherapy for prostate cancer, but prior to the diagnosis, the area between my shoulder blades was insatiably itchy. My wife was irritated by the number of times I had to ask her to scratch my back. And I'd rub against door frames just to try and alleviate the itchiness between my shoulder blades. And when I posed that to a number of my friends who've gone through this, they also said, yes, no, they also had similar itchiness in the back. And so that's my question to you.
Morning, Gordon. Sorry to hear about your diagnosis, and I'm pleased to hear you got it looked at, and I hope things are all now on the mend and you're going in the right direction. You're absolutely right to raise this, and the chances are that, yes, there is an association. Now, why do I say the chances are? Well, everybody's different, and some people will present with a totally different set of symptoms to somebody else, but there are some commonalities. Now, interestingly, I interviewed a lady a couple of weeks ago, and her name's Paola Vermeer. She works in Dakota in America, and she's just published a paper in the journal eLife, where she's been finding that when you have cancers, the nervous system establishes a sort of conversation with the cancer. And not just the nerves talking to the cancer, that happens because some cancers tune into the nerve transmitter chemicals coming out of the nerves, and it makes the cancer change its behaviour. She's able to show that the cancer secretes chemicals that also put signals back into the nervous system, which in turn changes the operation of bits of the brain. She's doing this in experimental animals, so obviously that's one step removed from us humans, but you can't ignore the fact that many people, before they pick up a cancer diagnosis, often also present with things like a mood disorder. Depression is much more common than you would expect by chance in people who are subsequently diagnosed with cancer, but not because they've got cancer per se that they know about. It's often that the mood changes come first and then the diagnosis is picked up. So researchers are becoming very interested in exploring these possible associations between the physical interactions of cancers and the nervous system. The other thing that cancers do, and this is what I was thinking as you were talking, is that they can produce what we call paraneoplastic syndromes. Because cancer is a genetic disease, when you mess around with the DNA messages in a cell, which is what cancer effectively does, effectively you place at the disposal of those cells the entire recipe book of life. So a cancer cell can make anything that any other cell in the body can make, And because the DNA also gets rearranged in some cells in bizarre ways, you sometimes can make fusion proteins where you link one gene to another gene and make the combination of the both. So you can make entirely novel substances in those cancers that wouldn't normally be made anywhere in the body. And some of them get secreted into the bloodstream. And when this happens, they can orchestrate changes in behavior of remote bits of the body which are tuning into those signals and being manipulated by them. And we sometimes see, for example, calcium levels go through the roof in cancer. It's quite a common association in cancer because the cancer starts to coordinate and control the calcium signals in the body. Other hormones can also be mimicked by cancers in remote parts of the body. So it's possible, I would argue, either because of physical interactions and effects on the nervous system, or because of remote chemical signalling, you can change the way that bits of the body behave and therefore produce other symptoms which may be associated with the presence of a malignancy at certain sites in the body. So it's not something that we should ignore, and you're not mad for suggesting it. Thank you for raising it.
Thank you for that question, Gordon out in Constantia. Ernest wants to know if you can rely on carbon dating as an effective measure of aging.
Yes, and interestingly, one of the best questions we ever had on The Naked Scientists a few years ago now, someone actually wrote to us from South Africa saying, can I carbon date my gran? The reason being that they thought she was over 100, but she didn't know exactly what her birthday was, and they wondered if they could use carbon dating to prove that grandma was as old as she claimed. Most people try and claim they're younger than their years, but grandma was desperate to prove she really was over 100. That's a genuine question. And the answer is yes, absolutely. Now, carbon dating, which was discovered by Willard Libby and won him, I think you got the Nobel Prize for that, but he actually was able to show, because of the half-life of carbon in the atmosphere, there is a radioactive form of carbon called carbon-14, which is made continuously by solar radiation and cosmic radiation hitting the outer atmosphere. So the levels of carbon-14 are roughly constant in the atmosphere, with the exception of during the 1950s when we did loads of bomb tests, which enormously spiked the carbon-14. Because plants are pulling that carbon-14 into the wood because of photosynthesis, there's a constant level of carbon-14 in us, because we eat animals that eat plants, and therefore we have a carbon signature that's locked into us at the moment we're either made or the moment we die. And the carbon-14 breaks down with a half-life of about 6,000 years. So if you measure how much radioactivity and carbon-14 is in something, and you compare it with how much you know is in the atmosphere, you can work out how many of those half-lives must have ticked by between the time that thing was in the atmosphere and the day now, and that tells you how old it is. And it's good for back to about 5 to 10, probably do about 10 half-lives. I think 60,000 years, you're really beginning to push the limit. So you can go back about 60,000 years with carbon dating in that way. And can you carbon date grandma? Yes, you can, because a lady at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden called Kirsty Spalding, she was doing this on DNA, because a lot of cells in the body are made at the moment you're conceived. They lay down their DNA in those cells and they don't change for the rest of your life. Nerve cells, heart cells, for example, very low turnover, and as a result you can use that to look at the carbon atoms and work out how old that bit of DNA is, and yes, you can carbon date grandma that way.
And we have to wrap it there on that fascinating response. We've got to wrap it there. Unfortunately, 2 minutes to 10 o'clock news coming your way at the top of the hour with Natalie Malchus. And a big thank you, as always, to The Naked Scientist for this wonderful opportunity to learn new things.
Cape Talk.
Cape Talk.